I didn't lose my independence overnight. I lost it slowly, disguised as love. I once believed that explaining myself was a form of respect, that if I spoke clearly, patiently, and with enough detail, people would understand me. Age taught me otherwise. The first sign was so small that I ignored it. On my 80th birthday, my son handed me a notebook. It was plain, brown cover, thick pages. He smiled and said, "Just in case you want to write things down." Everyone laughed softly. I smiled too. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't say that I still managed my bills without help, that I remembered appointments, that I knew exactly where I put my keys every night. I simply thanked him. That was easier. It always begins like this, not with cruelty, with concern. Concern sounds loving. Concern feels reasonable. Concern never introduces itself as control. At first, I welcomed it. Why wouldn't I? This was my son, the boy I once held through fevers, the boy I taught to ride a bicycle, the boy who used to ask for advice before making decisions. Care felt familiar, safe. Then came the reminders. Small ones. Did you lock the door? Don't forget your appointment. You already told me that. They were gentle, individually harmless. Together, they formed something heavier. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone forgets sometimes, even the young. The real shift came at the bank. I went to withdraw money for repairs at home, a routine task, something I had done my entire life. The teller typed, paused, then looked up at me with discomfort. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "but this account requires authorization." Authorization? I thought I misunderstood. "From whom?" I asked. She hesitated. "From your son." I felt something drop inside me. Not anger, not panic, shock. I thanked her and walked out. I didn't call my son immediately. I drove home slowly, replaying the words in my head. Authorization. Permission. That evening, I asked him calmly, directly. He sighed, as if I were being difficult. "It's just a safeguard," he said, "in case something happens." Something. That word carried everything. I asked him why he didn't tell me. He avoided my eyes. "I didn't want to worry you." I went quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I wanted to say would change something between us forever. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the same table where I helped him with homework, where I planned holidays, where I made decisions that shaped his life. Now, decisions about my life were being made without me. I wanted to argue, to demand explanations, to list everything I still handled on my own. But something stopped me. Not fear, understanding. He wasn't listening. He was managing. Over the next weeks, more changes appeared. Doctor appointments were scheduled without asking me. Furniture was moved for safety. Conversations about my health happened around me, not with me. I tried to speak once. "I'd like to be involved in these decisions," I said. My son smiled gently, the kind of smile people use with children. "Don't take this personally," he replied. "We're just trying to help." That sentence hurt more than any argument, because my life was personal. I noticed how often people spoke for me, answered questions meant for me, finished my sentences, explained my preferences as facts instead of choices. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror. Yes, my face was older. Lines where laughter used to be, gray hair where color once lived. But my eyes were clear, steady. I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. I was still here. That was when I understood something important. Explaining myself was no longer earning respect, it was inviting judgment. So I stopped explaining. I didn't announce it. I didn't argue. I simply changed my responses. When my son suggested something, I listened. Then I said, no, calmly, without reasons, without justification. The first time, he laughed nervously. The second time, he argued. The third time, he fell silent. Silence unsettles people who rely on explanations to maintain control. I began reclaiming small things, choosing my meals, scheduling my own appointments, managing my calendar again. Nothing reckless, nothing dramatic, just ordinary independence. My son watched closely, waiting for a mistake. It never came. Instead, something else happened. I grew calmer, more grounded, less defensive. One evening, he asked, "Why are you pushing me away?" I answered honestly, "I'm not pushing you away, I'm pulling myself back." He didn't understand. Not yet. And that was where the real conflict began.
After that conversation, the house felt different. Not hostile, careful. My son became quieter around me, not distant, observant, as if he were waiting for something to go wrong. I noticed it in the smallest ways. The way he watched me count change at the grocery store, the way he hovered when I cooked, the way he corrected me when I remembered something differently than he did. None of it was cruel. That was the hardest part. Cruelty is easier to confront. Concern hides behind good intentions. One afternoon, I received a call from my doctor's office. They were confirming an appointment I hadn't made. When I asked who scheduled it, the nurse hesitated. "Your son," she said. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat very still. I realized then that silence alone was not enough, because while I had stopped explaining myself, decisions were still being made for me. That evening, I asked my son to sit with me, not to argue, to clarify. "I want to be informed before changes are made," I said. "I want to decide what happens to me." He rubbed his temples, a familiar gesture, the one he used when he felt overwhelmed. "You don't understand how stressful this is for us," he replied. That word again, us. I asked him a simple question. "What exactly do you think I can't do?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Well," he said slowly, "you forget things sometimes." I nodded. "So do you," I replied. He didn't laugh. The tension grew over the following weeks, not openly, quietly. Paperwork appeared, forms I didn't recognize, legal language that felt heavier than it needed to be. One document mentioned temporary oversight, another mentioned best interests. Those phrases frightened me, because they weren't medical, they were legal. I asked my son directly if he was trying to take control of my affairs. He looked offended. "Haven't you noticed?" he said. "I already have." That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was confused, but because I was awake to something I had ignored for too long. Love, when mixed with fear, can become possession. The next morning I made a decision, not emotional, practical. I contacted a lawyer, quietly, without telling anyone. He listened carefully, didn't interrupt, didn't rush. When I finished, he said something simple. "You still have rights." Those words settled inside me like breath after panic. We reviewed documents together, bank authorizations, medical permissions, consent forms. None of them were illegal. That was the problem. They were preventative, which meant they were easier to justify. "Do you want to reverse them?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. The process wasn't dramatic, but it wasn't easy either. Some changes required my son's cooperation. Others required proof. Proof of what? That I was still capable. I began documenting my life. Appointments attended, bills paid, meals cooked, days managed. Not for validation, for protection. When my son noticed the changes, he grew uneasy. "You don't trust me anymore," he said. I answered carefully. "I trust myself," I replied. That answer didn't satisfy him. The following week, I received another call, this time from a social services office. They said concerns had been raised. They wanted to check in. I thanked them and called my lawyer immediately. That visit was polite, professional, uncomfortable. They asked questions about my daily routine, my finances, my health. I answered calmly, clearly, truthfully. When they left, I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Not fear, resolve. This was no longer about misunderstanding. It was about control. That evening, I told my son that any further decisions would require my consent, in writing. He was silent for a long time. Then he said something that revealed everything. "I'm just afraid," he admitted. I looked at him carefully, not as my caretaker, but as my child. "I know," I said, "but fear doesn't give you ownership over my life." He didn't respond. From that moment on, our relationship changed. We were no longer pretending, and the quiet battle entered a new phase. The formal notice arrived on a Monday. Plain envelope. No emotion, just authority. A capacity assessment had been requested. Not suggested, requested. The letter stated that concerns had been raised about my ability to make informed decisions. It listed examples. None of them were lies. That was what made it dangerous. A missed appointment, a repeated story, a moment of hesitation when answering a question. Small, human things, collected, reframed, turned into evidence. The assessment was scheduled for the following week, a neutral clinic, an independent physician. I appreciated that. Neutrality mattered now. I showed the letter to my lawyer. He read it carefully, then looked at me. "This is serious," he said calmly, "but it doesn't mean you're losing." The night before the assessment, I barely slept. Not because I feared the questions, but because I feared what losing would mean. If I failed, my life would become a series of permissions. The clinic was quiet. Too quiet. Clean, neutral. The doctor greeted me politely. No assumptions, no sympathy, just professionalism. He asked about my daily routine, how I managed money, how I made medical decisions. I answered slowly, thoughtfully, without rushing. He waited. That mattered. At one point, he asked why I disagreed with my son's involvement. I paused, then said, "Because care should support independence, not replace it." He wrote that down. The evaluation lasted longer than expected. Memory questions, logic tasks, hypothetical scenarios. Not once did I feel confused. Not once did I feel lost. When it ended, the doctor thanked me. No hint, no expression, just closure. Days passed. My son avoided eye contact. He was waiting. So was I. The results arrived in a sealed envelope, addressed to my lawyer, not my family. That detail mattered more than anything else. He called me that evening. "You're fully competent," he said, not casually, firmly. The report stated that I was cognitively intact, capable of making independent decisions, aware of consequences, concerned but rational. When my son read the report, something shifted. Not anger, shock. The narrative he had built collapsed. But fear doesn't disappear easily. He filed one more request, a legal petition, for guardianship. This time it went to court. The courtroom was small, quiet, intimate. No drama, just truth waiting its turn. My son spoke first. He emphasized concern, responsibility, fear for my safety. He never once mentioned my wishes. Then my lawyer spoke. He presented documents, timelines, contradictions, and finally the assessment. The judge listened carefully, then turned to me. "Do you feel unsafe living independently?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Do you understand the consequences of your decisions?" "Yes." "Do you wish to retain control over your life?" "Yes." The judge nodded, then said something I will never forget. "Concern does not replace consent." The petition was denied, clearly, decisively. The room felt lighter. Outside the courtroom, my son looked lost. Not angry, not defeated, disoriented. He had believed he was right, and now the law had told him otherwise. I did not celebrate. I did not confront him. I simply went home, unlocked my own door, sat in my own chair, and breathed. Weeks passed. Life settled. Not perfectly, but honestly. My son still visited, less often, more carefully. He asked now, waited for answers. Trust was not fully restored, but respect had returned, and respect changes everything.
The court's decision did not end our relationship. It redefined it. In the weeks that followed, something quiet settled between us. Not warmth, not distance. Clarity. I made small changes to my life, not because I was forced, but because I chose to. A weekly medical check-in, a trusted neighbor with a spare key, clear documentation of my wishes. Independence did not mean ignoring reality. It meant participating in it. My son noticed. He didn't comment. He observed. Time did what arguments never could. It softened fear. Not completely, but enough. One afternoon, he said something unexpected. "I thought I was protecting you." I looked at him carefully. "I know," I replied, "but protection without permission becomes control." He didn't argue. That was new. I stopped trying to explain myself. I let my life speak instead. Months passed. I managed my home, paid my bills, attended appointments, made choices, quietly, consistently. The tension eased, not because everything was forgiven, but because boundaries had been set. One evening, we sat together without discussing my health, or my age, or my future. Just silence. Comfortable silence. Later, I updated my will, not out of fear, out of intention. I added a letter, not legal, personal, for my son. It said, "I love you, but my voice is not something to be inherited. If you remember anything about me, remember that I chose my life every day." I sealed it, not as an ending, as a statement. As years passed, my body slowed. That was inevitable, but my sense of self felt steadier than ever, because I no longer lived in quiet defense. I began speaking with others my age, friends, neighbors, strangers. They shared similar stories, different details, same fear. One man said, "I didn't know I could say no." I told him, "You always could." The final moment of clarity came during a family gathering. My grandson asked, "Why do you still live alone?" Before anyone else could answer, I did. "Because I still know who I am," I said, "and because I want you to see that aging doesn't mean disappearing." He nodded, satisfied. That night, my son hugged me, not tightly, not apologetically, just honestly. "I see you now," he said. That was enough. Aging had not taken my strength, it had refined it. Not the loud kind, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that stands firm without explanation. I learned something important. Silence is powerful, but only when it is chosen. Dignity is not granted, it is defended, quietly, consistently, until it becomes undeniable. If this is the legacy I leave behind, let it be this. Growing older does not make you smaller, it makes your truth clearer. Lesson of day. Independence doesn't end with age, it ends only when we stop defending it.